So I thought with the summer sell season and the home sale season upon us, I thought I'd give you some useful tips about the contract that your realtors, your very capable realtors, are handling for you, and especially from the seller side, just some important things to keep in mind and to maybe even discuss with your listing agent up front to make sure that you're going to have a wonderful and seamless sale to the property. And if something does go wrong, that you're able to cancel it to the best of your ability, effectively and efficiently. So the first rule of thumb, something that nobody ever talks about in these agreements, is there's another party to the agreement, and that's called escrow. And escrow, obviously, their job is the mutual exchange of money for deed, right? That's their job, as well as other things. They're investigating liens and other matters, and to the extent there's title insurance, they're facilitating all of that as well. But escrow also is, you got to remember, it's an independent business and they want to protect themselves. And so one of the escrow rules is going to be in almost every escrow agreement, especially if it's a residential property, is that they're going to require 2 signatures to get a cancellation. And that can cause friction sometimes when buyers can't perform or when something goes awry, and how do the parties work through that. So one of the number one things that I would advise sellers to do, and have a candid conversation with your real estate professional about, is make sure that your agent is going to be proactive about managing contingencies. All right, so what are the contingencies? Well, here, let's just go over them real quick here. Contingencies could be a loan contingency, right? Can the buyer get a loan? They don't know that when they give you the offer, so they have a contingency to see if they can qualify for a loan. Appraisal contingency might be one of the things that's provided. There's going to be a contingency usually for investigation of the property. That's where the buyer gets to look at it all. And we've in other videos we've told buyers, hey, make sure you hire professionals to do this because they are as-is sales. But this is where they get to kick the tires of the property, right, and see if it's going to fit for them. And there's other contingencies. I'm not going to take all your time tonight, but there's other contingencies like title contingencies and insurance contingencies and the like. But with respect to the most prevalent of them, appraisal, investigation, loan, the most, let's say, proactive thing a seller can do with respect to contingencies is make sure that you, A, know how long the buyer has to make themselves comfortable with whatever contingency it is, and B, make sure the buyer waives the contingency in the applicable time frame. So here's an example. Investigation of the property. The default is 17 days, okay? Well, you may be surprised or not surprised to know this, that on the 17th day, that contingency isn't automatically waived. Sellers, you have to be proactive here. You have to have your agent request that that contingency be removed. Because the contingency, the way they're removed inside of the contract is that the party should waive them, and they have a duty to waive them, meaning the buyer should say, hey, it's been 17 days, here's my waiver. But that rarely happens. And when it doesn't happen, that's when the seller's agent needs to send a notice to buyer to perform. And it gives them 3 days to either remove the contingency that's still in place or allows the seller then to cancel the agreement. Now, we already talked at the beginning, cancellation isn't as easy as you'd think because escrow also has to protect themselves. But it is a way to get the seller off the hook and can start looking for other buyers even if that particular escrow isn't closed. So, managing that contingency period is the number one way to keep the buyer on track and to make sure you don't miss out on a really good offer because you're tied up in escrow with someone that isn't going to perform or isn't able to perform. Same with loan contingency. There's a certain amount of time. So, hey, at the point that the loan contingency expires, we need to be serving those notices. We need to have our agents serving those notices and being proactive. Without making this go too long, there is a requirement, sellers, that you have provided all your seller documentation to the buyer for you to pull this proactive measure off. So make sure that you're doing your part also in giving all the seller documents within the 7-day period that you have to give it to them. Okay? And then you can enforce the contingencies. Last thing, the worst thing I see is if you don't do this, what happens? If you don't do this, what happens is, here's my closing date, end of the month. And as we get close to the end of the month, we haven't removed any of the contingencies. And then the buyer, for whatever reason, doesn't qualify for the loan, doesn't like the property, whatever. We get past the closing date and the contingencies are still intact because we never enforced them as a seller. And in that situation, one, if it does cancel, you're forfeiting the good faith deposit, which you likely could keep had you had those contingencies removed. And two, you're bringing into play the cancellation, how quickly you can cancel because you haven't been diligent throughout the process. So this is a long one. It's summer sell season, but if you're thinking about selling your house, your agents know this. Make sure that they see it the same way you do when it comes to removing contingencies. And maybe it's not important to you. Maybe you want to take a different tack than what I've given you. And that's fine, as long as you know why you're doing it and what the consequences are. So summer sell season, this contract, I love this contract. But let's make sure that you manage it in the manner in which it's designed. So that's a tip for summer sell season.